Should I stay or should I go? Are you staying in the relationship because there's love left or because you're afraid to start over? How do you know if it's a rough patch or the end of the road? When is it time to walk away? Welcome to Session and Secrets.
Easy to stay in that same cycle over and over, even if it gets painful.
Yes, the staying or going is my personal happiness, more important than the collective happiness.
Are really sad and fearful about thinking about ending the marriage.
To their attention, how do you bring it up and help them understand?
How you want to feel if you do decide to get divorced.
Welcome, Brian.
Thanks so much for having me.
And Brian, tell me about yourself and what do you do?
So I'm licensed as a marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice in Newport Beach, and I work probably half and half between individuals and couples. With individuals, I tend to specialize in working with addictions. Another thing I was a police officer for 11 years, so I'll hear cops and firemen that hear about my background, and they'll reach out to me for counseling as somebody that understands some of their profession. And then with couples, work with all the different marital issues that come in, and also couples that are on the brink of divorce. And that's, I think, what we're talking about today.
Yes, and Brian, sometimes it's not about falling in love. It's about recognizing if the relationship has reached its limits. In your experience, what are the most common reasons that couples get to this point?
I think for a lot of couples, there is not things that they've been doing. They've been avoiding conflict for so long and have gotten really good about it, but in the process have really drifted apart. And so it can be easy to stay in that same cycle over and over, even if it gets painful. So what I've seen is that there's a tipping point at some point that decides I'm no longer able to tolerate the marriage as it is.
Right. So they've been like holding on to it for so long that at some point it's like the something spills the cup.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I want to read something you said. I have learned that the one leaning towards divorce is often dealing with hopelessness that their spouse's behavior and their marriage could improve. I have learned that the person wanting to preserve the marriage is often dealing with fear of how divorce will negatively impact their children and finances. Tell me more about this.
Yeah. So for the spouses that are considering divorce, they are often considering divorce because they don't feel like there's any potential that the marriage could get better. So they're feeling really hopeless and think that divorce is the only option. When I'm working with spouses who are considering getting divorced, I'm helping them understand what their contribution has been to the problems in the marriage while listening to their hopelessness. I'm also pointing out relationship dynamics and unhelpful patterns that I've heard them talk about as they're describing their marriage to me. And I've always been surprised. So a spouse who is considering divorce actually becomes more hopeful as I tell them about the problems that I see in their marriage, and especially their contribution. Because if they contributed to the problems, then they can be part of the solution. And that brings people to be more hopeful. For the spouse that wants to save the marriage, they're thinking about all of the negative consequences that are likely to follow to their kids and finances and jobs and where they live. And they are feeling afraid that the other spouse can make a decision that will affect them that they have no control over.
Right. And so have you seen any like common patterns that people or like couples fall into and that leads them to this this moment?
Yeah, there's a few that we see often. So one they call the pursuer distancer. And so you've got one of the spouses really wants to get to the bottom of problems and get things solved and talk things out. And the other spouse is the opposite. They try to avoid. So you've got the pursuing spouse that continues to chase after the other spouse, and it polarizes their position where you've got the one person who's just in pursuit and the other person who is just trying to get away.
Yeah, like the mouse and cat
and mouse, right?
cat and mouse
Yeah.
chase.
There's another real common dynamic is like a parent-child type relationship where one of the spouses views themselves as much more responsible and proactive. And so they constantly lecture their spouse, who they turn into basically a rebellious teenager. So it's this overbearing parent and this really resistant teenager. And that interaction becomes very toxic.
Yeah, it creates a divide, right?
Absolutely.
How do you bring that to their attention? How do you bring it up and help them understand the dynamic of the relationship?
So I think that is what is so helpful about discernment counseling is I am able to do that. In discernment counseling, it was designed for situations where one or both spouses are unsure if they want to continue in the marriage.
And how does that when someone doesn't want to continue the marriage, sometimes it's clear that they don't want to continue the marriage. Do you think that's like is there still hope for healing?
I think so. I would never tell a married couple that their relationship is not going to work. I believe most marriages can and should be saved. And while we can't save every marriage, I do believe if both people are committed to working on the relationship and also are committed to working on their own personal contribution to the problems, marriages can really be changed around.
How long? I mean, this is a question I usually get. Like, how many sessions do you think we need?
And what I say is I have no way to tell. There's so many dynamics that go into it, but as a rough number, I tell clients to expect to be there about 6 months. That it usually takes about 6 months for us to identify the problems and start working on them, and for the couple to feel like we're making progress.
Yes, like to create new patterns, right? Or to have first you need the understanding of what dynamic we're having, and then what are you going to do about it?
Right.
To change.
And then they practice, and they have trouble with it, and then they come back, and we practice some more, and then they go back home, and so it's this process of me coaching them and them learning skills in order to reconcile their marriage.
Right, like practice at home, right? What
That's
are you
right.
doing? How are you generalizing what's going on, the insight that you're learning in therapy, and how are you applying that to life?
Yeah.
Right? And what is emotional ambivalence?
So emotional ambivalence is when somebody feels two things that may be different all at once. So there may be a spouse in the marriage who feels really hopeless that the marriage could be different, but at the same time, they also are really sad and fearful about thinking about ending the marriage. And so it's that split, those mixed feelings that turn into that ambivalence.
Yeah, I think we're talking about it like that internal conflict of yes, the staying or going is my personal happiness more important than the collective happiness.
That's right.
Of my family.
Yeah, that could be. Mm-hmm.
Right.
It becomes an ethical decision because if it's a marriage that both spouses committed to lifelong marriage with each other, and so the ethical question is now, if I no longer want to do that, am I okay breaking this commitment that I made to this person in the past?
Is it similar, you think, for couples that have been in long-term relationships but not necessarily married?
Yeah, I think so. Discernment counseling is focused on relationships where both people have made a lifelong commitment to be with each other. So it's not for dating couples. It's for those who have committed to share their lives together. And so for some, they're married, and others, they've decided to create a life together and not get married.
Right. And how can one tell if or what are the signs? What are the questions we need to ask ourselves if we're deciding between staying or going?
I think it's important to think about how you want to feel if you do decide to get divorced. If in the beginning you're thinking about this future version of yourself and can imagine how you'll second guess yourself, those are important things to focus on in the present. So have I really tried to improve the marriage? Have I made personal changes that I need to? Have I been honest with my spouse about what I've been feeling in the marriage? Have I thought about what a divorce life would look like? So oftentimes people think about getting divorced. It feels like a relief, but they really haven't looked at the details of what that life would look like. So I'm always encouraging spouses to think ahead and to do that intentional thinking now so that they don't feel regret in the future.
Right. And so what would be the difference between thinking about it in a way of, because sometimes you can think of it as like, okay, I'm already thinking about divorce and living life on my own instead of thinking about healing my relationship.
Right. Yeah, you could get focused on the escape instead of working on the marriage that is still there. Yeah.
Okay, so me thinking about the grass could be greener on the other side, it's a form of escape.
Yeah, and not helpful because they're not focusing on the issues in their marriage. They're thinking that there could be life that's much better on the other side. The problem is we can't divorce ourselves. We're going to carry the same unhelpful dynamics into the next relationship. The statistics are that if a couple ends in divorce, they will often remarry or be in long-term committed relationships. So really important that they learn to work on those issues in the marriage they have instead of trying to get into another relationship where the problems will just follow them.
Yes, and if I think the statistic says like if we've gone through a divorce, we're more likely to get divorced again.
Yes, yeah, and it's because there was this hope with the first divorce that if I get away from this person, I can be happy. They just find another person to share all the unhelpful dynamics with.
Right. So it does take some accountability or awareness. Like, what do I need to change?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And in your experience with the couples you've seen, what are some of the red flags that where you recognize, okay, this is the end of the relationship, or that they recognize that they don't want to continue working on healing?
Yeah, I think so. I watch spouses really struggle with that question, and when have they decided to end their marriage? And that's not always clear for spouses because there's still oftentimes a part of them that would like to save the marriage. What a question that I tend to ask couples is, for a spouse that's considering divorce, do you want to feel differently in your marriage? And for some spouses, the resentment has been so deep and so long that they do not want to improve the marriage or even be in the marriage, regardless of if it does improve. And so I think that's a hard place to get out of.
Yes, yeah, like it's too many years, right, going on in this maybe emotional, not just emotional, but also physical distance.
Yeah,
It's sort of like there's nothing to hang on.
Yeah, they've been going in different directions for so long that the relationship has kind of disappeared.
Yes, and what are some or how can we tell if we're staying out of hope or out of fear?
I don't know actually, and I think we all experience a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. And I think a spouse who is considering divorce is going to feel both of those things. Can you repeat that question again?
So are we saying because we're hoping for a change that maybe never it's not going to come, or are we staying in a relationship because we're afraid to start over?
If we're talking about married couples, I think it's okay to make a decision to stay in the marriage because you're afraid of the consequences. I have heard a lot of spouses tell me, I know I shouldn't stay for my kids. I don't agree with that, though. I think that staying for the sake of your children is a really noble reason. I think the fear of what finances would look like and what future family engagements would look like, I think that's all really important to consider in the decision of whether to stay or go.
Yeah, like take a look at the big picture,
Yeah.
right? Of how it's going to impact you or your loved ones.
It all matters. Yeah, it's a big package.
Yeah. And what keeps relationships stuck?
I think when two things. When a spouse is not willing to look at their contribution to the problems, the couple is not going to go anywhere. We have to be open to understanding what our contribution is to the problem and committed to working those out. The other way I feel like couples get stuck is that they stay in these unhelpful interaction patterns, like we were talking about earlier, this pursuer distancing, parent-child. If you stay in those toxic interactions, couples will find themselves stuck.
And when it comes to those both patterns, right? The pursuer distancer, how do you help couples end that dynamic?
So I think it's educating them. It's showing them what they're showing you, but that they have not yet seen. And for spouses that really want to work on their marriage, they are open to this feedback of what's going wrong in our marriage and how do we fix it. And so the first step is always education about, hey, this is happening. And then making sure that I have the buy-in from the clients that not only do they agree with me, but they are also willing to work on their own side of it.
Like their contribution to that dynamic.
Right.
And so do you find one to be more challenging than the other, like the pursuer or the parent-child?
Yeah.
Do you feel like one of them is a little harder to?
I think they're all complicated and they all cause a lot of problems.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if there's one that's worse or easier to correct. They're all very difficult.
Mm-hmm. And especially if it has been going on for years, right? If you have a couple that's been married for 20 years or they married really young in their early 20s.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine changing these habits. I think about just like simple things, simple habits I try to change in my life, like where I put my keys. Something like that would be really difficult for me to change. And it's difficult for spouses after they practice these unhelpful dynamics. It's very difficult for them to get out. It takes a long time to unpractice what they have done.
Yeah, like the default. That would be the default,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yes. And for them to understand, right? It's a dynamic and a contribution. You both contributed to this dynamic.
Yeah. And which brings some hope, because if you're part of the problem, then you can be part of the solution. And I've really found that so interesting in my practice, where spouses who can really understand their contribution to the problems become so much more hopeful that, this marriage has a chance because I played a role in it and I can play a role in the reconciliation as well.
Yeah, like I can be an active participant.
Right.
But often couples, or what I've seen with the couples I work with, sometimes it's like they don't want to do something or they don't want to create change because they're waiting for the other person.
Yeah.
To go first.
Yeah, there's this standoff where each person knows what they would need to do to change, what that would look like. But they don't, because they're waiting to see the other person change first. And we tend not to work. We don't get much progress in those situations. It's scary for both spouses because I'm asking them to take a risk and to do something different even before your spouse does something different. And there's a lot of risk with that.
Right. What are the risks?
I think the risk is you start working and you start changing things, and you don't see your partner showing up. That your partner is not doing the things that you're asking them to do, even though you're doing maybe more of the things that they're asking you to do. So the risk is this stalemate. The risk is one person feeling like they're doing more in the marriage than the other spouse.
Yes. And that can be even scary to put ourselves there, right? To that, like, it's vulnerable, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's really vulnerable. You put yourself out there, you let your guard down, you show some emotion. Maybe the change is in being more affectionate with the other person. So maybe one spouse is really pushing themselves to be more affectionate, and they should do that even before they see the changes in their spouse. But it's hard to do.
Yes. And could you tell me a little bit about the process of discernment counseling?
Yeah. So discernment counseling was designed for situations where one spouse in a marriage is considering divorce, and the other spouse wants to save the marriage. So you've got a spouse who is leaning into the marriage, who more wants the marriage. You've got a spouse who is leaning out, is considering getting divorced. Those spouses have very different goals. For the spouse that is wanting to save the marriage, they're trying to do everything they can to save the marriage. For the one that's considering divorce, what they're trying to do is to figure out if they should stay or if they should get a divorce. So these mixed agenda couples, like we call them, they are not well served in a marriage counseling session, because marriage counseling requires two spouses that are both committed to working on the marriage and are also both committed to working on their personal contributions. But in these mixed agenda couples, they have different goals. And so mixed agenda couples at best is unhelpful treatment when we're trying to do regular old marriage counseling. It tends to create this dynamic where the therapist and the one that wants to save the marriage are chasing the leaning out spouse around the session room, trying to get them engaged. And it often causes a lot more pain. So this protocol was developed for just that very situation, where you've got one spouse who wants to stay and the other spouse who is thinking about leaving. And the format for discernment counseling is what is so helpful and makes it unique from marriage counseling.
Okay. And how in your experience, like, how long do couples stay in therapy when they have this ambivalence?
So in discernment counseling in particular, it's time limited. So we would meet for no more than 5 sessions. And that's just so that we're not dragging that deciding process out forever. That's a big distinction between discernment counseling and marriage counseling. Marriage counseling is kind of open-ended of how long we keep working on the marriage. But discernment counseling, there's a defined amount of time.
And how does discernment counseling help people if they come to the conclusion of separation, divorce? How does it help them with that?
Well, what is often helpful is the therapist has been pointing out their personal contribution. And so going into their next relationship, hopefully they won't repeat some of the same mistakes that they did in this one. It's also important for the therapist in discernment counseling to be educating them about the different options of separation and divorce. Oftentimes people are separating by one person just leaving, and it's just because the other person can't take it anymore. But there is something called controlled separation, where the spouse or the spouses, in order to save the marriage, make an agreement on a limited time of separation, but not to get away from each other, to give the marriage the best chance of success. There's also different ways to divorce. There's mediation, where it requires one professional sitting down with both spouses who decide what they want for the terms of their marriage. And that requires a level of cooperation between the spouses. The other we're really familiar with, a litigated divorce, that there's this built-in incentive for attorneys to create more conflict that leads to more billable hours, and families get destroyed in the process.
Yes, financially and emotionally, right?
Yeah, and so another option for couples that maybe are not a good fit for mediation is called collaborative divorce. And in collaborative divorce, each spouse has an attorney, but there's an agreement that they're not going to handle any issues in court, that they're all going to settle issues outside, and the focus on collaborative divorce is doing right for the family, not just each individual spouse.
Okay. In your opinion, what does a healthy ending look like?
I think spouses that can go through a divorce process and they're cordial with each other and they're collaborative and make decisions together, that feels really helpful for me. And also for the relationship after the separation or divorce, because oftentimes there's kids involved.
Mm-hmm.
And for spouses to be able, after a divorce, to be able to be in the same room together, to be cordial with each other, benefits not only them, but the rest of their family as well. And so that feels really healthy to me.
Okay. And how can people use discernment not just for relationships, but in all areas of their emotional lives? What's your opinion?
Well, it's a pretty focused protocol, but there's a couple big components in discernment counseling. One is intentionality, and the other is self-reflection. That those are big themes within discernment counseling. And we're only in life, we're only going to have a chance of living in line with our values if we're living intentionally. If we're just reacting impulsively to things that happen, we are not going to be living in line with our values. And I think the other value of self-reflection, being able to look at yourself and see what your issues are and be willing to change, I think that benefits everybody in every aspect of life.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for all this information and bringing clarity to this topic and more understanding of discernment and what we need to do if we're battling between staying or going.
Thanks so much for having me.
Where can people find you if they want to know more about it?
So my website's the best place. My website is just my name, Brian, Brian, and my last name, Whitley, WHITLEY.com.
Ending a relationship doesn't mean something went wrong. Sometimes it means we've grown in ways that the relationship can't contain anymore. Thank you for joining us. Please make sure to like, subscribe, or leave a comment down below.